On Story is brought to you in part by the Alice Clayburgh Reynolds Foundation, a Texas family providing innovative funding since 1979. On Story, presented by Austin Film Festival, a look inside the creative process from today's leading writers and directors. This week's On Story, acclaimed Boyz n the Hood and Fast and the Furious director, John Singleton.
I always feel like the cheapest way to make a movie is to write it. The hardest thing to do besides write a great screenplay, which is a hard mountain, it's like climbing Everest, is to write a great screenplay. And the second hardest thing to do, the next mountain to climb, is to get somebody to actually read your thing.
In this episode, John Singleton discusses the influences behind his diverse work from over 20 years of making films.
My story started when I grew up in Inglewood in an area called the Bottoms, which was all these apartment buildings that have now mostly been torn away. And a block over, there was a place called the Century Drive-In. So I grew up on the backside of a drive-in. I used to watch movies with no sound on them. No, seriously, movies with no sound on them. And they weren't they weren't The Godfather. They weren't great movies. They were like, blaxploitation movies, Superfly and Pam Grier, Foxy Brown. I used to always tell Pam Grier her breasts got me in the cinema. You know what I mean? Excited me about cinema. And Bruce Lee movies and slasher movies like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween and stuff, right outside of my window every night. I would watch the films, but without the sound. You know what I mean? I think that that really helped formulate that, and kind of reading a lot of comic books helped formulate my visual acumen. You know what I mean? That you can tell stories with images. So, and this is a time in the early 70s, late 70s, early 80s, where there was a kind of new renaissance in filmmaking and stuff, but not for somebody like me from my background. I didn't have access to a Super 8 camera or anything. I didn't know anything about that. So I used to try to draw animated films in notepads. I'd make little adventures with my comic book heroes and Daredevil and Iron Fist and Luke Cage and stuff. And then I started getting smart. I got my homeboys who do know how to draw every panel, and we'd make these little movies, we call them flip books. But that's how I think I started with films and filmmaking, and then I started discovering, I think I saw a 2020 special on the making of Close Encounters with Steven Spielberg, and I saw Steven Spielberg directing, and I said, I want to do that. I want to do that, what that guy does. 3 weeks before I started school, I saw She's Gotta Have It in Santa Monica, and I ran into Spike Lee.
What about Nola Dog? What do you want to know?
It was his first movie, and I was going to meet him before I graduated high school in February or March of that thing, just before he went to the San Francisco Film Festival with that film. But my mother wouldn't let me use the car because she said, "Oh, this has nudity in it. This is not. I'm not going to condone that." I saw him before the movie started, and I said, "Hey, I told him whoop-de-whoop-de-woo. I did a little name drop, and somebody he went to school at Spelman that was going to hook us up, because she was a woman that was kind of my mentor, overseer at this thing. The NAACP had a competition called AXO, and I was entering in the filmmaking contest. And one of my first films was about this black dude who was so up over this white chick, he killed himself. So they didn't like that at the NAACP. And so
right. I remember
she said, "You remind me of my friend Spike." So she was going to introduce us, but I couldn't go. He was trying to raise more money for finishing funds for She's Gotta Have It. So then when I saw him and the movie was out, I said, "Hey, I'm looking forward to seeing the movie." Yada yada. He was cool with me, and he's not that warm to nobody, right? And so I go in the movie, see the movie, and I'm like, whoa, you know, I'm excited, you know. And I had seen the previews of the movie because I had just started going to what's known as revival theaters. They don't have very much of them anymore, where they show old films. I went and saw, Kurosawa's Ron, and then before Ron, there was a preview for She Gotta Have It, so I knew it was coming, but I didn't know Spike was gonna be there. To make a long story short, I see the movie, I come out, and he's surrounded by all these Hollywood types, and they're all over him, and he saw me there, and he said, excuse me, and he moved everybody out the way, and he said, what'd you think? And I just said, I'm on it. I said, at least some real black folks in a movie, this is good. I said, you know what else? I'm going to USC in 2 weeks, watch out for me, I'm coming. Initially, it was Russell Simmons who read it, and then when Russell got excited about it, Stephanie had gotten informed about it, and so it's like, see, I told you this is this guy, you know, we got to find a way to get this movie made. But to her credit, she did what executives in this business would never do. She put everything online. She did everything but jump on the table, like, you know, like, this is a movie that we're here for. This is the reason that we should kind of movie we should be making. Right. And so they made it. They were testing me. They were saying, you know, hey, what if we tell you want to buy your script and get somebody else to direct it? And I said, well, we have to end this meeting right now. They're like, oh, you know. And I said, well, because I'm going to direct this movie. And I, you know, the whole idea was like, I got to act like, you know, nobody wants to give you nothing if you act like you really need it. So you got to be like, you know, part of that is a little hustle. It's like, okay, well, fine, bye. And I didn't have a pot to in. I was like, but I was like that. I was like, because I had to, you know, I wanted to do it my way. You know, I felt that what I was doing was kind of like what certain people at my peers at the time that I looked up to, like, you know, people like Gus Van Sant, you know what I mean? Like, when I was about to prep Boyz n the Hood, you know, I would watch Drugstore Cowboy over and over and over again, you know what I'm saying? Because I liked what Gus was doing, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, like, and so, like, I never thought I was going to be a studio filmmaker. I always planned on being an independent filmmaker. Right. So then once I got a chance to do some studio films, and then, you know, you have an ebb and a tide and wave of that where you're a studio filmmaker and whatever. It wasn't so much of a thing for me to say, you know what, when they said, well, we don't want to make this thing with you because it's too wild and crazy. It's okay, fine, I'll go do it on my own. And then I made Hustle and Flow. Right. I produced it.
Well, you know what I mean? You paid for it, right?
And paid for it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to show you. You don't know nothing, so what's hot. You know what I mean? And so, like, my whole idea is, like, I know better than what people who work in fear are. Yeah. People who work in fear, like I said before, there's probably a dozen people in here who have some type of vision of something you want to do, and you're always like, oh my God, will they like it? Don't ask yourself that question, will they like it? Do you like it? What they like. It's what you like. You know what I mean? There's so many great, great things that come that would have never come if someone had said, well, I don't know if I should tell this story because it's not going to identify, nobody's going to identify with it and everything, right? You know, you look at a great movie, Ben Zeiken did Beasts of the Southern Wild. The movie could never have been made in the system, you know what I mean? But he just had a vision for what he wanted to do, right. You know what I mean? And he did it, and he made it kind of homegrown. He shot it over a period of time, and it just, you know, it's a poem. It is. And the thing I've chiefly learned that most of the young filmmakers should be learning or concentrating on is it's all about having that original concept and a genuine concept of where you're from. Your perspective and your POV, it may not be for everybody, but it's your perspective and it's valid. You know what I mean? You know, even if it's just you, there's people out there that want to see what you have to say. It's like when you're making a film, it's like you're having a conversation with people. You know what I mean? And so you have to have a very specific conversation, and if you do that very, very well, it will propagate in some way. The course that I'm teaching is called Emergence of Multiethnic Cinema, and it talks about how the breakdown in the last 100 years from a manifest destiny attitude of white male-dominated cinema to more of a multi-ethnic point of view of cinema now that is now the commercial idiom. It starts with John Ford in 1962 with Sergeant Rutledge, with Woody Strode. John Ford put the camera on him and made him a Buffalo Soldier. And he's like larger than life. Mm-hmm. So he shot Woody Strode the way that he shot John Wayne. Mm-hmm. The first time a black man had ever been shot like that. Wow. And you watch it, and you're like, whoa. If you didn't have Sidney Poitier in The Heat of the Night with Rob Starger, you wouldn't have had Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte in 48 Hours. So there's a kind of a lineage show, showing that stuff. If you didn't have Gordon Parks directing Shaft, you know what I mean, and the way that he did, you wouldn't have, I dare to say you wouldn't have Denzel Washington. And I always felt that, privately, that I knew that I had to kind of like mitigate whatever was going to come at me. You know what I mean? Boyz is a great movie. It spoke, it spoke to something that was already in the zeitgeist but hadn't been seen cinematically. And over time, it's even more propagated and become even more important. It begot, even Straight Outta Compton now, this year. But I feel that a lot of the press that I got, the positive press that I got was in backlash to how certain people felt about Spike at the time, because he was the only person out there saying Hollywood is fucked up, you don't hire enough black people, you don't get credit to enough black artists or any people of color, and let's take black people out of the equation. Before, we were press testing the Oscars and all this stuff. You look at a movie like The Last Emperor, which is one of my favorite movies.
You know what it means to be an empress. You are an empress.
Why do you not make love to me anymore?
Because you have become an opium addict. Opium killed my mother. Opium destroyed China.
You can buy opium anywhere in Manchukuo.
Shut up.
In any shop.
Shut up.
All these Oscar nominations and no acting nominations.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You know what I mean? John Long, John Chen, you know what I mean? Like none. And they got like 10 or 12 Oscar nominations. All the way back to the silent age, there was kind of an attitude towards people of color, different people, whatever, if you were different and you didn't have a certain white male perspective of things, they were trying to define what people were. So I'm showing different clips, and then I get to what it is. You know what I mean? And I slowly show that breaking down. In school, I read everything that I could read. I read, interesting enough, you probably haven't even heard of some of these screenwriters I'm talking about, but there was a time where Robert Bitton and David Newman and stuff. Do you remember the Superman script, the original Superman script, the writers of Superman, and Mario Puzo? You'd read those, and you'd read Bobtown, Chinatown, you'd read Paul Schrader, you read everything that Patty Chayefsky did, you know what I mean? If you're not a writer, unless you've read Patty Chayefsky's screenplays, I'm telling you right now, unless you know who Patty Chayefsky is, you ain't a writer yet. You know what I mean? Because that's who you need to study. You need to read the stuff that he wrote, and then watch how it was interpreted and see how everything that's in those projects is right, as we say in theater, on book, but it feels spontaneous. If you're a good writer, you can write something that actors can emote, and it's still right on book. It's exactly what the text is, but it feels spontaneous. And so I was trying to go for that. I try to go for that in what I do. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel like you're listening to something that somebody wrote. It feels like conversational. It has its tradition in literary, and it's also, some of it is theatrical. Yeah. Because some of what we do in our daily life is theatrical. You know what I mean? Even when we're not aware of it, some of the conversations that we have are very theatrical. But the process that all of us are in is how to recreate that in a very organic fashion. August is the reason that I became a writer. When I was a sophomore at USC, I saw, it was right after The Fences had just got all of its Tonys. When James Earl Jones won the Tony, it got Best Play. It won all the awards back east. So then they brought the production west, and my mother got me a ticket to it, and I saw it. And so I came to back to class at USC. And like you say, it was an alienating environment. I'm pretty much the only black kid in every class. They're looking at you like, why are you here? You know what I mean? There's only going to be one Spike Lee. I was like, well, there's only going to be one John Singleton, right? That's when I really started writing, and I realized that, that I could have an impact. And one thing I learned from August's work pretty much was, especially the early plays, was how unadulterated and how poetically Negroid they were. You know what I mean? In terms of the, how, from a certain perspective, there was a certain language that black people had that were unique to us. And so that was like, even more so than Spike, you know what I mean? Like, 'cause he was so, August, everything he was going for was really, really working on multiple levels. It wasn't something that, it was something that could be felt and intellectualized. It wasn't something that could just be intellectualized or just pure passion, and when he writes certain things, he would write with an alliteration that would say different things. Like, there's a line in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom where a character says, I may be a fool, but I ain't the same fool twice. That's when you and I part ways. And then the way he would roll stuff out of a tongue. So I was like, wow.
Ain't nothing wrong with it. I've done been a little bit of everything. Now you're talking, you're as big a fool as that name. Gonna be a bit more before I'm finished with it. Gonna be a fool again. But I ain't never gonna be the same fool twice. Now I might be a different kind of fool, but I ain't gonna be the same fool twice. That's when we part ways.
That's kind of like what I want to do. I want to be able to say stuff without saying it. Like, like there's a line in Boys in the Hood where Doughboy's character says, yeah, 3 hots in the cock, like rest of the time I spend reading and writing to my girl.
Bro, how'd you get so big? Up and on and eating, man. Ain't nothing else to do in the pen. Yeah. 3 hots in the cot, you know what I'm saying? Rest of the time I was reading and writing my girl.
Read?
Yeah. I ain't no criminal. I can't read.
Like, I'm trying to find ways to do that in a contemporary way, the way August does. He just really, really was in tune with kind of the universe, you know what I mean? And his influence were so eclectic, you know what I mean? He can call from Greek tragedy, he can call from Roman history, he can call from, from various texts that he's read, contemporary and ancient, you know what I mean? And a lot of what he was pulling from was actually ancient. And then when we talk about the Greeks, we're talking about the tenets of what's known as modern storytelling and how it finds its roots in Greek tragedy, and Sophocles and all that stuff, right? He would do that stuff, but he would make it like funky. I had no experience before I did Boys in the Hood, but I had not just a formal education, but a formal interest. It wasn't like I was just watching films. I was reading stuff. My process was to read the biography of a very interesting filmmaker, you know what I mean, and then watch their pictures, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? So, I could take someone like Alfred Hitchcock and then watch, read a bio, the numerous bios that are made on him, and then watch his pictures. I read a bio of Fritz Lang, you know what I mean? What made Fritz Lang so unique when he was making those movies in Germany, and then watch his German films, and then watch his American films, right? And and that was before I got a chance to actually have the equipment. So then when I get the equipment, I'm like, okay, I'm just going and interpreting. And then as I started exploring this field, and as a filmmaker, and talking to other filmmakers like Francis Coppola and different people around, I was like, yo, if you're gonna steal from the best, and you see like Martin Scorsese's work, who's a brilliant filmmaker, right? But a lot of what Marty Scorsese did in his early work and some of his later work is all from great filmmakers. He pulls from Fellini, he pulls from a lot of some old Hollywood films, he pulls from the neo-realist period and stuff, right? That shot that he does, the tracking shot that everybody loves, we have everybody in the foreground and background and everything like this, that's straight out of Fellini.
And then there was Mo Black's brother, Fat Andy, and his guys, Frankie the
Got in trouble?
Freddie No Nose.
But even Fellini, quiet as it's kept, and I've never seen anybody write this, so you can follow me if I'm wrong. I feel Fellini was doing that in the tradition of the big frescoes, the big Italian frescoes, where they have they have all those people. So Fellini's doing something that is maybe 500, years old. See what I'm saying, cinematically. And then Marty looks at it and he makes it his own. Right. So that somebody else is going to take it and say, oh, that's Marty's stuff, but they're not knowledgeable enough to know that it goes back. I know exactly what they're pulling from. You know what I mean? And instead of saying that they just did it themselves. You know what I mean? But now I've gotten to the point where, and I've done, I feel honored to say this, but you can never say this in a business meeting. You pre-plan as much as you can as possible, and then you get on set and you rehearse it with the actors, and then you just make it up as you go along. It's jazz. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's spontaneity. And I've made movies like that. 4 Brothers made up the whole thing as it went along.
Mm-hmm. Be aggravating.
Yeah,
Come on, man. I'm watching the game. Come on. Why don't y'all hold that down?
Yeah.
Hold that down, man.
Little woman. Get him, Jerry.
Try it one more time.
What you gonna do?
You'll see.
Big teeth. Bite me? You do got some big teeth, Jerry. Yeah.
It just feels like spontaneous, you know what I mean? But you have to be very, very confident and prepared to do that. Is you got like 35 people saying, what do we do next? Okay, well, let's see, we're doing this. But you don't know. Mm-hmm. You're seeing it, you're confident enough to know exactly that whatever you can figure out is gonna be more exciting than actually what you have.
Right.
You know what I mean? And for me, it's like, as I said before in the beginning of this discussion, it's recreating spontaneity. Whenever you put the camera on, it's not a reflection of life. It's not life, it's a reflection of life. Mm-hmm. But you have to recreate spontaneity. A movie that you guys should see, all of you you've had to have seen Taxi Driver. But if you've only seen Taxi Driver once, twice, 3 times, you haven't seen it enough. It's a mixture of stark reality and stark dream reality. Yeah. And that's why it works. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And so that's what I'm always like trying to go after. Like, okay, yes, I can do something very, very hard, realistic, and all that stuff, but can I do something that, that can only be told in a cinematic way that will, after people see the experience, they want to see it again and again and again. Not necessarily because it makes them feel good, mm-hmm. but because it brought something out them emotionally. It brought something out you emotionally that you're like, why am I feeling this way? You know what I mean? Like, let me go back and watch it. Why do I feel this way? You know what I mean? And so that's what I feel I'm going for as an artist. And I think that you can get that by studying film, by studying all types of art, by studying painting, by studying dance, you know what I mean? Being a very literate person, you know what I mean? Like, reading different forms of literature. Not just things that are specific to whatever culture you're from. You have to be very, very astute and open to different things and different forms of storytelling.
You've been watching a conversation with John Singleton on On Story. On Story is part of a growing number of programs in Austin Film Festival's On Story project, including the On Story PBS series, now streaming online, the On Story radio program and podcast in collaboration with Public Radio International, and the On Story book series available on Amazon. To find out more about On Story and Austin Film Festival, visit onstory.tv or austinfilmfestival.com.